What's going on, everyone? Today is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. We're bringing in the new year over here at Textbook Sports. I know I've gone absent for a while, haven't posted a podcast in a couple weeks. My apologies for that. I hope you all spent the holidays with your family, friends, and that you just enjoyed it overall and cherish those moments that you spent together with them. Those moments will create memories and all of that sort of fun stuff. But we've got a lot to talk about, especially with what we've missed. Playoffs coming up, national championship. Congratulations to Go Blue, Michigan. You are the 2024 college football national champions. Going to be talking about how they did it, what's next for Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy. He still has a year of eligibility left. Is he going to enter the NFL draft? Is he going to stay one more year at Michigan? Talk about what I think he should necessarily do. Once again, what is the next step for Jim Harbaugh? Is he staying or is he going off to the NFL? Talking about the NFL playoffs, what your team really needs to look out for. And of course, it's as of yesterday, it's Black Monday. A lot of coaches are getting fired, especially head coaches. Teams are looking for new head coaches. Talking about that, and furthermore, let's just get straight into this podcast. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Follow me on social media. The links to my social media will be in the description. Turn on the bell for post notifications to all. You don't want to miss any of the content I have coming up, especially as we talk about the NFL draft. We'll be doing a ton of film reviews, prospect profiles, and that sort of deal. Quarterbacks is going to be heavy, and a lot of people are going to be talking about that, especially with this upcoming draft. What should Chicago do? Once again, like I said, lots to talk about. Make sure you follow me on social media. Links will be in the description. Subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, share this podcast, these episodes, videos out. And yeah, like I said, let's just get straight into it. As y'all know, that's textbook. So let's start off with what happened yesterday. Michigan, congratulations. Go Blue. You are the national champions. We all know kind of like the elephant in the room of this team and what's gone on over there. Lots of allegations that this team was cheating, that they were using high advanced technology, they were going to future teams, sporting events, doing filming illegally. Listen, they're still the national champions. They've won it. We can say all of those things about if it's going to be taken away, if it's an asterisk. I don't think Michigan fans necessarily care, especially since, they're still going to have that feeling. They still witnessed it with their eyes that they are national champions. You really can't take that feeling away from the players or from the coaching staff, anyone associated with Go Blue. So congratulations to them. How did they do it? And I think when you look at this and how they won their national championship, and of course the whole span of Harbaugh's tenure at Michigan, it took patience. It took a lot of patience. You remember he gets the job there, hasn't beaten Ohio State until 2021. And he kind of figured things out. It was interesting. I think it was Kirk Herbstreit brought it up in the broadcast that when he got to Michigan, it was, he brought Shea Patterson along, and it was going to be this kind of air raid type of offense, which is going something against what he did with the San Francisco 49ers and his natural identity, which is to run the football, ground and pound, be physical, play great defense. After that COVID year and that 2020 season, he fires some coaches, brings in that mentality and that DNA of running the football, ground and pound, physicality, defense, and it's gotten him 3 straight wins against Ohio State, their rival, 3 straight college football playoff appearances, and to top it off, a national championship, 15 games that they've won this year. The identity, I wouldn't say the identity, but the game plan for like we talked about all these pregame matchups during the college football season. You have to stop their run game. And they're going to be a physical football team, but let's force JJ McCarthy to do things outside the pocket, force him to make some difficult reads. No team really in college football could get close to it. I mean, Washington, I would have to say yesterday Washington did pretty close to it because it felt like in the second quarter of that game, Michigan was just going to ground and pound, let this game, I mean, just end it right there. The game almost felt like it was on ice. But then they kind of got away from that identity. They required J.J. McCarthy to make some tough throws into tight windows, some NFL type of throws and decisions, and he just necessarily couldn't. So it surprised me that they got away from it, but then they got back to it. Blake Corum had 2 rushing touchdowns. Donovan Edwards had gone missing all year, but finally he was able to find a rhythm, find something in this national championship game, got himself 2 touchdowns. Like I said, the if you're an opposing team playing Michigan, your goal is to stop that run game and kind of force McCarthy to make those types of throws. No team really did it, and that's why Michigan is the national champions right now. They're 15-0 with just the way they dominated both lines of scrimmage, whether that be on the offense or defensive side, is truly remarkable. Their defensive tackles fitting the gaps in run support. Their secondary holding up just enough. Will Johnson did I would say, a good job. I'm not going to say it was a fantastic job because there were some plays where you felt like, okay, maybe they're going to call it holding. The officials had called it pretty fair. I guess they let the players play. But yeah, for Will Johnson, wasn't his best game by any means, but I say it was. I mean, it's good enough. Now to talk for Washington and the Huskies, I know you fell short, and the goal is always to win the championship and at the end of the season be crowned number 1. But not a whole lot of people expected this team to be in the college football playoff, much less be in that national championship game. And it was close since I would say about 6 minutes remaining in the second half on till about, I guess, 8 minutes in the fourth quarter. It was kind of close. It was a 2013 game for a majority. The Washington defense was getting abused in the run game early. They kind of figured some things out. A lot of their linebackers and safeties were fitting in the run support, taking away the rushing lanes for Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards on the inside zone reads and on the outside zone reads. What helped Michigan early on was all they did was duo, and they were just go. I mean, it didn't cease to stop. Like they could have just run duo the whole game and won the national championship outright. But like going back for Washington, it wasn't Penix's best game. Now he was dealing with, it looks like it was his ribs, his right ribs, really uncomfortable in this game, and we know he had a really decent and a fantastic game actually against Texas in that semifinal game, but it was also a Texas secondary that was very vulnerable, and just the Michigan secondary is a lot better than the Texas secondary. Like, just to say that outright. It was a tough test for him. Maybe he was dealing with that injury. Maybe it was a lot of nerves. But from what I saw, it's, when you get him off his platform and when you use the blitz, bring pressure, which was what Michigan did continuously in this game, his mechanics aren't fantastic and they're not great. I'd imagine they're going to have to be cleaned up at the next level. But when you bring pressure to him, he kind of dips his elbow, which causes the accuracy to be off. He was off on a lot of throws, held on to his first read for a little bit too long if it wasn't there, really struggled to find the backside in for Odunze on seemingly what was kind of the last play of the game for them when he threw that pick to Mike Sainristil. Just a tough game for him. See how he bounces back. Obviously, he's going to be entering the NFL, going to the pre-draft process. Some things he has to clean up with himself, which is going through the reads a little bit quicker, not really predetermining where he wants to go. And then once that deep ball, which is his top notch A+ at, once that's taken away, those when their receivers can win those 70-30 balls, when they become 50-50 balls, when there's equal talent in the secondary, can he find something else outside of that deep ball? And then like I said, mechanics, going through the reads, finding the backside in, going through them a lot quicker. Congratulations to Michigan, and Husky fans, they need to hold their head up high. I know the end goal is win the national championship, be crowned #1 at the end of the year, but with the expectation preseason to what they've accomplished now, Husky fans have to be very happy and just remember this team because it's one of the best Washington teams I've got to watch. And now the talk of college football, other than Michigan being the national champions, is what is Jim Harbaugh going to do? Is he going to enter the NFL or is he going to stay with the national powerhouse that he's built at Michigan? If he's looking for the NFL, I don't know if the Raiders are atop of his list, but I know that the Raiders have him on the top of their list since there's been rumors since 2021 dating back of when Harbaugh was kind of on the fence about entering the NFL or not. The Raiders were consistently in reports, rumors, speculation that they wanted him as their head coach. Their owner Davis definitely wants him. They've made a lot of hard pushes. I think the most ideal landing spot is the Chargers. You have Justin Herbert, your franchise quarterback. And although there are a lot of key pieces on that Chargers team that are getting older, they do have a top 5 draft choice. I think that they have pick 5 somewhere there to go get Justin Herbert, more protection on the offensive line, or another weapon for him to utilize. Maybe that's Brock Bowers. And the Chargers, they need a culture reset. Like, this is a team that they do have the pieces, although some of them may be getting older, but they needed a culture reset. And I always date back to the time for the Chargers of when they beat Kansas City in KC. I think it was Herbert's second year. You felt like, okay, this is the team that's going to turn the corner. They're going to become Super Bowl contenders. They beat KC in Kansas City, and it just never turned out that way. I mean, they've had the opportunities. They went to the playoffs, and you're up 27 against Jacksonville, but then you somehow blow it. So maybe you wanted Harbaugh earlier or someone that's a legitimate head coach earlier when this team was a lot younger. I think Justin Herbert swings the pendulum totally in their favor. And I'll have to say this, regarding, head coach openings and whatnot. NFL teams that want to get a new head coach or kind of on the fence on it or needing one, I think this is the time to strike while the iron's hot. There's obviously Dan Quinn is going to get interviewed. Then you have Harbaugh. The Ravens defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, certainly he's got that unit playing fantastically. He's one of my favorite head coaches, or potential head coaches coming up. And then possibility of maybe bringing in Mike Vrabel, or you bring in the offensive coordinator from Detroit, Ben Johnson. Bobby Slowick, offensive coordinator, Houston Texans, and what he's done with that young team and all of that with C.J. Stroud, and the offensive line doesn't have all the pieces, but they're playing good enough. And what he's done over there, another coach from the Shanahan tree. If you're the NFL team and you're considering it head coach or you have to strike now while the iron's hot. So Panthers, Falcons, Titans, Chargers, Commanders, possibly the Chicago Bears, and I might be missing a couple other teams. You want to get a head coach, get them right now. Now, what do I think Jim Harbaugh is going to do? If he were to go to the NFL, I see the Chargers being the most likely destination. And Michigan is going to have a lot of, fifth, sixth-year seniors. They had a lot of experience on their football team. A lot of those guys are going to be declaring for the NFL draft. You have Corum, maybe Edwards goes into the NFL draft. A lot of your pieces. I mean, Will Johnson is going to be, he's got another year left. He's definitely a 3-and-out player. Sainer still is going to be going to the draft. What is Michigan going to have left for next year? But what he's built, I find it kind of hard for him to leave. Although I get it because it's coaching back in the NFL. The pay grade, it's a lot higher. Also, the thing about it being the NFL is these are teams that need a head coach, and you don't know how the situation is going to pan out. Some of them do have franchise quarterbacks, some of them don't. That's something he has to weigh in. But with Michigan, it's steady, and I think it's the only thing that's steady and right there for him. But it'll be interesting to see what he decides. And like I said, if he does go to the NFL, most likely destination Chargers. Although I could see him just staying at Michigan and kind of keeping this powerhouse that he's built right now. So, of the head coach openings, the one I necessarily don't get, and it happened earlier today, is the Tennessee Titans firing Mike Vrabel. I think this is just a huge mistake, absolute mismanagement, and from the general manager, whoever is making these signings, trades, draft choices, it's a complete mismanagement. You have A.J. Brown on your team, and you have to remember in that 2021 season when they made the playoffs, I think they were the number 2 seed that year. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. They're a playoff football team. He's had Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback for a majority, if not all, of his tenure. So he hasn't had a qualified, franchise guy he can really lean on. Took that 2019 team to the AFC Championship. You beat New England. Not many people expected that team to beat New England, much less go to the AFC Championship game when their only option was just running Derrick Henry, and that's what they did. I don't understand how you can do that. And then you trade A.J. Brown. Now he's got, a young offensive line that's still having to learn things. I think they have some nice players on that offensive line, but they're still young. They have to understand the NFL or get to the NFL type of speed and level, adjust to it. What do they have pass catching wise? I don't understand it. Any team that's getting Mike Vrabel is getting a heck of a head coach. Maybe it's a reunite. Maybe he reunites in New England, and he takes over. If the Patriots, we all presume, fire Bill Belichick, if they do that, that's a perfect fit for both sides. But that's the one I don't understand. And then moving on to one I completely understand, and I think it should have really been done earlier, is Arthur Smith. Listen, and this brings up a lot of controversy of what Jameis Winston did at the final play of the game. Listen, Arthur Smith's teams have been completely terrible. And then the way he's handled the media, not to have it be that much of a critique, but just the way he's handled the media. Obviously, there's people that, this doesn't qualify to real football, but there's a lot of fantasy football people that are heard about him. It's just, and it's not about fantasy football. It's just about how he's managed or misused his key playmakers. Like, you draft Kyle Pitts, you go 7-10. You draft Drake London, you go 7-10. You draft Bijan Robinson, you go 7-10. So at least there is some consistency right there with Arthur Smith, but you should have done it earlier. I mean, maybe he goes somewhere and kind of as an offense coordinator gets his feet under him, but head coach, it's a lot different. Like, you can be a very good coordinator, but it's a lot different being a coordinator and then being a head coach, having to manage a whole entire locker room and that sort of deal. And then going back to, the Jameis Winston thing, they had the ball at the goal line. There was a certain play call. You felt like the game was already out of reach. They're probably just going to kneel it down, game be over. But they get Jamal Williams a touchdown. Now Arthur Smith is upset about it when he really should be upset about how he just drafts key players, mismanages, misuses them, doesn't put them in the best situation to succeed, and consistently goes 7-10, and with all the chaos that he's caused. The last thing I'll say about these potential head coach openings is the least desirable. I think the least desirable one is the Carolina Panthers. And saying this, I feel so bad for Bryce Young. Just, I think people need to understand more about, like, yes, there for team success, yes, you have to have the quarterback, and then you have to have the offensive coordinator to match with it, or the offensive minded head coach to match with it. And then putting the pieces around them, you have to have a GM that can do those sort of things. But a lot of times, it stinks that this kind of has nothing to do with football, or the project kind of on field. But then the owner of the team, like, what is the owner of the team gonna do? Because we've heard a lot of instances where the owner of the football team is probably or most likely an egomaniac, wants it done a certain type of way, wants to entertain and show everyone else why they were the ones that were correct and show them everyone else why they were right. And it feels very similar like that with the Carolina Panthers. Like, it might be that Bryce Young has no power in how this team can play or how he can better get developed. You hear the reports about the head coach, Frank Reich. He wanted CJ Stroud, but the owner wanted Bryce Young. So then they draft Bryce Young. Now the owner is upset. So he fires the coach, and he basically blames everybody but himself. And the Panther situation is it's really undesirable. There's no weapons in place to help Bryce Young succeed. I'm hoping they can get the coaching right, but what kind of head coach is going to want to, or potential head coaches want to go to the Carolina Panthers when they have the owner is kind of overshadowing everything, doesn't want the coach to just be the coach, is going to point the blame back onto you. And if the team loses and the team isn't succeeding right away, you're going to be the immediate scapegoat. Now you're fired. You go to other potential head coach or coaching destinations, whether that be a head coach or an assistant coach. You're having to tell them what went wrong in Carolina. Are they going to believe you? And that sort of thing. You have to sell them. That I don't see how a potential head coach goes to Carolina. Now I hope and pray that everything does go for the right way for Bryce Young, because they could. It's trending very likely to where Bryce Young kind of is in a no succeed, lose kind of situation with the owner and his kind of egomaniac. And I'll lastly say that it goes to show teams ruin a prospect more than the prospect really just didn't have it. Now there's some instances. There's a lot of different scenarios where the prospect didn't have the talent to play in the NFL. It was probably the coaching, management, something somewhere was mismanaged, or they couldn't understand, the basics for the NFL. But I think it just goes to show that when you're scouting a player, and I'll talk a lot about this when we do film reviews, breakdowns, and that sort of deal. There's a lot of talented players, in college. They have talent. Maybe it's not NFL talent, but for those that do, a lot of times it's the teams that mess things up for the player more so, than the player. Because every prospect you'll review, break down, they're gonna have weaknesses, and they'll have their pros, they'll have their cons. It's about, and a lot of the best organizations do this, where they put the structure in place and they rally around the player, the quarterback, and in most cases it is the quarterback, right? Because that's your franchise guy. And they understand how they can say, okay, well, this player has a weakness, and it's clear that this weakness is not getting developed or it's just not clicking. So to do that, we'll get an offensive line. We'll put them in this type of scheme whether it's a run first heavy scheme. It relies on a lot of play action. It's an offense that does the basics, and it's not very necessarily complicated. But with our player, it works. Take for instance the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. Like Lamar Jackson, one of my favorite prospects to watch coming out of Louisville. Was he as clean a passer or a pocket passer as some of these older quarterbacks? No, not really. Not necessarily. He still needed some work onto it. The Ravens drafted him, a high class, quality franchise that just understands football. They understand what it takes for the player to succeed. First year, right, he goes into that playoff game against the Chargers, anemic performance, right? It was brutal. Next year, he goes out. They put a system in place for him that's a run first system. They do the basics. He excels at some of these things. These are his weaknesses, so this is how we can mask over, band-aid, cover those weaknesses. Wins an MVP. Now they haven't won a Super Bowl, although this year they're in a really good position to. But that he didn't really have the playmakers. He didn't have the offensive coordinator. A lot of Ravens fans were talking about it. Now he has Todd Monken, who's an excellent offensive coordinator, possible head coaching candidate, and they actually have weapons on the outside. Like you have Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham Jr. Although he's getting up there, he's a little bit older. Still brings them some quality production. Isaiah Likely, the fantastic tight end that they drafted, a day 3 tight end. He's performing really well. They put together a great and fantastic offensive line. It further strengthens my point that there's a lot of players that do have talent in what it takes, but sometimes the organization fails them. Now, while on that subject, let's talk about the Chicago Bears, because they have the #1 pick in the draft. Many presume, and the consensus says, that they should select Caleb Williams with the first overall pick. I'm not going to say what the Chicago Bears should do, just because I want to watch a little bit more film on both to really get a feel for the player themselves. But what I've watched so far between the two, they do have similar issues, weaknesses, and deficiencies. For Justin Fields, he'll hold on to the ball too long, anticipating throws, throwing into tight windows, going through the reads, going through them quick enough, ball security issues, footwork, speeding up his footwork, speeding up the drop back. Those are the things that I see. Then with Caleb Williams, it's, the obvious one is he'll hold on to the ball too long, and his time to throw is averaging somewhere about 3.6 seconds, and then if the first 2 reads aren't there, he just scrambles, or sometimes it just looks like that's his immediate tendency to abandon a clean pocket, doesn't take the sure things, and instead looks for the big plays. And it's cool because it works in college, but then at the NFL, the next level, these defensive linemen and everyone is just a lot more faster, and they're similar athletes to you, so you just can't out-athlete them. And so you see the similarities with give or take a few. When Justin Fields was coming out of Ohio State, and even when I've studied him in high school, followed the recruiting and all of that, you could see the tools that he had there, and you saw the strengths. Like Ohio State, they highlighted the strengths that he had. And that happens with that can happen with any quarterback when they have the receivers that Ohio State has and stuff. But I watch his footwork, and I watch his pocket presence, the way he goes through reads. Much better at Ohio State. But then you look at it in the NFL, and it's a lot different. Something's really changed. There was a report out there that Getsy moved, his footwork to having I think it's his right foot forward or something like that. And so that changed things for Fields. He is inconsistent with the footwork. But when he entered the league, and I see some similarities with like him and Lamar Jackson, although Lamar has won more and accomplished more, taking his team to playoffs, and all those sorts of things. But you see the similarities. Like I said, when Lamar entered the NFL, he got to a quality franchise, and they put the stuff together for him. It was a coaching staff that embraced him and helped him. When Justin Fields entered, I don't see a coaching staff that embraced him. I saw a coaching staff that showed more of the weaknesses as opposed to masking them and trying to make him this pocket passer. Now, he did have, up and down performances. And of course, typically rookies don't perform really well in their first year. If they do, you have a Hall of Famer in what you have with Stroud, Mahomes, and all those other quarterbacks. And then in the second year, it's new management. They just completely tear everything down. They're starting the rebuild. And so you saw the flashes. He had the fancy running plays, but then it wasn't enough consistency with operating in the pocket and the throwing side of things. You got DJ Moore, and Cole Kmet has played nice this year. So then you figure, okay, this time now, we've got consistency with the coaching staff. It should work. And what I've seen just from some of the games that I've watched, I don't see a coaching staff with the Chicago Bears that's putting him in the right situations to succeed and all those other such of things. I see it kind of very similar to year one, trying to make him more of a pocket passer than really what he is, not, covering up some of the weaknesses that he has and embracing the strengths and that sort of deal. Now, he does have DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, so he has, some things. But right, and I say it's with every quarterback. Quarterbacks need something to help them. Otherwise, you're just not going to play quarterback if you don't have any offensive line or any kind of playmakers. But it's about, coaching him up on little things because there's some little things that he can really fix. And like I said, his footwork and all his mechanic stuff at Ohio State, a lot better than what it was. And going through the reads, just about everything of the basics, a lot better at Ohio State than it was in the NFL. We get some adequate coaching, like, with look at what not Sirianni, but Steichen. Look at what Steichen did with Jalen Hurts, right? Hurts had that phenomenal MVP last year. Then Steichen's not there, and we've seen what Hurts has done in the absence of Steichen. Then look at what Minshew did with Steichen. It shows you and it showcases that coaching matters. So has the coaching been there for Justin Fields? No. If they're going to keep this same coaching staff, move on from Fields and go on with Williams, I like Caleb Williams. He's my number one quarterback from what I've watched so far. Like I said, still have to do more research, but, the generational stuff is, the arm angles, the off-platform throws, and just what he can do in the, the arsenal of an arm that he has. But it all matters with coaching, scheme, and what you have in place. The Bears have an opportunity to put something really phenomenal in place if they were to keep Justin Fields. And the same thing can be said with Caleb Williams, right? Because the Bears have, pick 9, outside of the first overall pick that they have. Nice opportunity to get an offensive lineman or an extra wide receiver. For me, this conversation, I think the Chicago Bears management is going to trade Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams. If they were to do that, you have to have the coaching staff right in place. And maybe they stick with Eberflus. Who knows? By the time this podcast is being put out, or even right now, they might have fired him. You have to get the offensive coordinator right. Because just watching some of the games, it's just so basic. And it's like, well, what are we doing to help Justin Fields? Like, you watch with Jordan Love, they're doing some really creative things, taking advantage of how the defense is playing them and that sort of thing. And then no one, when Jordan Love was playing against the Kansas City Chiefs that one time when he had in his first start, thought Jordan Love was going to be something spectacular or even a resemblance of what he is right now. And like I said, it just goes back to coaching. Like, if you decide to stick with Fields or not, you have to have the coaching in place, the system in place, the players in place for all of that to work. Like I said, just going off of whim and gut feeling, I feel like the Chicago Bears are going to trade Fields, draft Williams, but it's enticing to think you could trade that number one overall pick, get 3 more first round picks, or something just absurd, because you'd have to think that the price for that number one overall pick is gonna be sky high and a lot more than what it was last year. Build out more for that defense. Maybe get an extra edge rusher from Montez Sweat or another cornerback. And then you can get yourself a Marvin Harrison Jr., who's, I think, the best player in the draft, and or maybe an offensive lineman, and then build out your whole entire roster and be similar to like what the Philadelphia Eagles had. And then if you get the coaching, whether that be offensive coordinator, head coach, right, it's just a great situation to be in. And so those are my thoughts on the Fields or Williams, number one pick kind of saga. Let me know, all my fans, subscribers, everyone listening to this podcast in this episode. If you're Ryan Poles, what are you doing? Are you trading Fields? Are you drafting Williams? Let me know in the comments what you think. I appreciate your participation. And once again, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit that post notifications bell. You don't want to miss any of the content we have coming up, especially with film breakdowns. That's really fun. I'm really looking forward to all this, to breaking down these prospects with you and kind of sharing this platform together. Now it's on to the playoffs, and really, I remember earlier in the season, it was like they had Michael Keegan Key, and they were talking. It's like this promo. They were talking about writing the script and all that sort of thing. Well, the script writers couldn't have written it any better than they have already. I mean, you have the Detroit Lions and the LA Rams playing each other in the wild card round. Matthew Stafford, longtime Detroit franchise quarterback, goes into Detroit to face them. Tyreek Hill is going into Kansas City to face them. And I know there's a couple other more. Oh, you have the Houston Texans, Cleveland Browns, that Deshaun Watson trade sort of things. Kudos to them. Looking at these matchups, the one that interests me the most, and it's a shame, I feel like, that it's going to be on Peacock, is Houston Texans and Cleveland Browns. Because we get to see, okay, when these two teams played each other on Christmas Eve, there was no CJ Stroud. Texans were missing a lot. Cleveland Browns and Joe Flacco they did anything basically that they wanted to. Took over that game, won it convincingly. And usually in these types of rematches, where the team that won in the regular season usually doesn't win in the postseason. I'm not saying that's going to be the case. I like Cleveland a lot in this game with their front four or their front seven, their whole defensive line, what they have in the secondary. But it's going to be a fascinating matchup to see CJ Stroud, potential rookie of the year, go up against a vaunted and physical Cleveland Browns defense. I have the Cleveland Browns as a team that goes on to the AFC Championship game confidently. I'm not going to say convincingly or easily, because I think it'll be tough, but I feel confident in what they've done. And who knows how Joe Flacco plays, right? I mean, he's played really good so far when he stepped in, but you look at it this year, a lot of the backup quarterbacks, they've had these insanity runs, but then at some point in time, maybe the defenses, or that defense staff, they figure something out, and now that insanity run, everyone says it's over. So it'll be interesting. What I know for sure is that the Cleveland Browns are going to run this football, a lot. They're going to rely on that type of physicality. Now, what helps Houston is that they faced some really physical, run-first football teams with the Indianapolis Colts. They struggled with it at first, but then they adjusted. And against the Tennessee Titans, like with Derrick Henry and all of that, it's very hard to slow Derrick Henry down. Although Titans' offensive line was not as good this year as they've been in previous years with Henry, but still, to stop him, speaks for itself. And then another game, I feel like the LA Rams, I like them a lot in this game because what they can do to that Detroit Lions secondary. Like, the Detroit Lions, what helps them is that they've got their safety back, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. But, I mean, he it's still a team effort, right? Especially with their secondary. They've had a lot of woes, mishaps. Now you're going up against Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua, and Sean McVay calling the plays. You know he's going to identify a lot of weaknesses, lots of crossing routes, use the run first. It's a lot's going to rely on Aiden Hutchinson this game because the Rams' offensive line really isn't that great. And then, I mean, they're okay, but I think Hutchinson can have a day against them. It's They're gonna have to use tight ends, but find it very hard finding a tight end to block Aiden Hutchinson. They're gonna have to dial up a lot of blitzes, a lot of pressures to get Matthew Stafford uncomfortable because if you can force Matthew Stafford outside the pocket and throw off that timing stuff, that goes a long way. And for Detroit, it does depend on the offensively. It depends on the status of Laporta, although it doesn't look like he's going to play this game. Other guys are going to have to step up for the Detroit Lions, whether that be Raymond, Reynolds, someone else has to step up and kind of fill that Sam Laporta role, but from a different spot. It's going to be difficult because he is like your offensive tackle, wide receiver with just the things that he does. It'll be interesting to see. Going to be a fun playoffs. Then you've got Green Bay, who's playing really well, and Jordan Love he's got some confidence with him. They're doing things offensively really nicely. Aaron Jones, he's back. They're going to get their playmakers back. Christian Watson, I would imagine, is going to be back in this game. How does their defense hold up? Because if you can disrupt that timing and pressure Prescott with Rashawn Gary, he's going to be a huge X factor in this game. I like Green Bay's chances, but I still think Dallas wins this game outright by at least 15 points. So I mean, it's gonna be a wild card round to watch. A lot of teams from this round go make a deep playoff run. If you had to ask me the teams that could do it, the I like Buffalo with what they've done and with their offensive coordinator Joe Brady, and then I like the Houston Texans. Now looking at the NFC side of things, I'd have to say Dallas out of that wild card round, although they are a divisional winner. So, speaking of Dallas and being a divisional winner, this next topic it's about the Philadelphia Eagles and what the heck has just gone wrong with the team. Those of you who watch this podcast or have watched previous episodes dating back to October, late September, my issue with them on the offensive side of the ball is they haven't established a run or haven't found it, and then the play calling is just too basic. It's too Madden high school level. Now, defensively, their secondary, I had questions about them holding up. I didn't think they could, and they haven't. And then they just missed tackles. The linebackers, everyone just seems out of place. Pass rush hasn't been as dominant as it used to be. Now, they have played a tough schedule, and so maybe they kind of dialed a couple of things back, but I find that hard to believe that they've, dialed things back, just looked ahead to the playoffs, because you want to have some momentum going into the playoffs. A lot of guys getting hurt. A.J. Brown went down with an injury. We saw what Jalen Hurts' finger looked like, and then Devontae Smith, he's down with an injury. Probably the most miserable 10-1 or 10-1 start that a team's ever had. Like they did go 11-6, and you look at it for some other teams, 11-6. Oh, that's impressive. But with the expectations for the Philadelphia Eagles, you expected it to be better. Now they do get the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who haven't. I mean, they looked good, and it felt like their momentum-defining game was that win against Jacksonville. But then we see what Jacksonville's done, and then we saw how Tampa Bay played against Carolina, only putting up 9 points. These two teams did play each other earlier in the year, but it's a lot different Eagles team now. It'll be interesting. It's a new start for them. That's the plus thing that they have is it's 0-0, right? A lot of teams, and we see this happen a lot. They'll go 13-3, have these fantastic regular season runs, but then come time of the playoffs, something happens, and the playoffs is a different beast and a different animal. I'm kind of 50-50. 50-50 on this game. I'll let you know who I have later once I be able to watch these teams a lot more closely. But for right now, I'd have to give the slight edge to Tampa Bay just because how much confidence does Philly have going into this playoff game, and really what the coaching staff has shown you thus far. Now it brings up an interesting conversation it's been talked a lot about in Philadelphia. Should they move on from Sirianni if they don't, achieve their goals and if things don't get better? That's an interesting spot because the Eagles have, on paper they have a really talented roster. To me, what's been their biggest letdown this year is the secondary and coaching. And if you were to fire Sirianni, obviously, you have to. He's a coach. He hires these assistant coaches or has some kind of input on it. It has gone completely opposite direction, a complete 180 as to what it was last year. Do you fire him off of that? And if you do, man, is that now you're a team that's in the driving spot to land Harbaugh? It's going to be an interesting playoffs. Lots to talk about, especially too with the NFL draft. And we've reached the end of this podcast. I'll have a lot more for you all later in the week. It's sad, but that's a wrap for the regular season, and it's depressing. It was a joy to be on this podcast and spend a lot of the time with y'all, get to interact with a lot of you. But now we're looking forward to the playoffs, right? It's crunch time. Palms get sweaty. Knees weak, mom spaghetti. Yeah, I appreciate all of y'all listening to this podcast. Make sure to follow me on social media. The links to my YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Spotify, all of that is going to be in the description. Make sure you go check that out. Be a friend, tell a friend, share this podcast with others. I appreciate it. I want to spend more time with you all on this platform, get to talk about football and just talk about some ball. What do you think about the upcoming NFL draft? What should your favorite team do? You want to talk about how your team should rebuild themselves or what spots that they need to look to in the off season as well as the free agency NFL draft. Hit me up. We can definitely talk about it on this podcast. I'd be glad to. I once again appreciate y'all. God bless y'all. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoy, watching these playoff games, having some wings. What is your favorite meal to eat, during the playoffs? Do you like Buffalo Wild Wings, pizzas? What's your kind of thing? Let me know in the comments. Once again, I appreciate y'all. Have a fantastic day. And until next time, deuces.